Hey everyone, welcome to Beginnings, the show that asks, where do creative people come from? My name is Andy. I'm the host of the show and a writer and performer based in Los Angeles, California. Speaking of which, Los Angeles, I just got back from my very first movie premiere. I got back from attending my very first movie premiere. And let's just say, at the party afterwards, they had donuts. So, that's the benefits of living here in Los Angeles. You get to go to a movie premiere, and you get some free donuts, and also they had green tea ice cream. Hey everyone. Yeah, look, I just wanted to give you, the audience, a little peek into my glamorous life here in Los Angeles. This is a great episode. This is Will Fox. If you don't know who Will is, let me read you his bio very quickly. Born in Houston, Texas, and raised in London, Paris, and the American South, musician Will Fox spent his adolescence moving from country to country with his family. Back stateside, destined to operate a historic grist mill in the Shenandoah Valley, he instead moved to Los Angeles to become a troubadour. After his stint as a member of the now-defunct LA Darlings Los Angeles Police Department, Will turned his attention to his own pursuits. By the way, as a band, Los Angeles Police Department. That could have been confusing. Because I would say the actual Los Angeles Police Department, I would say they're not Darlings. I guess unless you're rich and white, then I suppose they're Darlings. Anyway, where was I? After a stint in the now-defunct LA Darlings, LA Police Department, Will turned his attention to his own pursuits. His first solo work was the Cosmic Dusting EP in 2018, and his latest, Which Way, is out July 12th on Two Syllable Records. I was sent his album. I liked it a ton. So I'm like, yeah, let's talk. And we get to some very interesting stuff. Will is what is called a third culture kid. I think I said that right. What does that mean? Well, you'll find out in this episode, so stay tuned. Anyway, we talk about that and a lot of other interesting stuff. Some interesting moral questions we get into. What else? That's enough. You'll hear in a couple minutes for yourself. What else can I say? Hey, if this is your first time listening to Beginnings, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you want to check out other episodes, all of them are on Spotify. You can download them all on beginnings.libsyn.com. I've talked to tons of people, from John Darnielle of the Mountain Goats to Mitski to Matt Sharp from Weezer and The Rentals. That's just musicians. I've talked to tons of TV writers and actors and comedians and visual artists and lots of other creative people. So check out those episodes too. If you like what you hear, you can subscribe to the show on Apple Podcasts, on Stitcher, Spotify, Google Play, and a bunch of other places. And you can always find me on social media, on the hellscape that is Twitter at Andy Beckerman, and on the not so hellscape that is Instagram, also at Andy Beckerman. All right, thank you so much for checking out the show. And you know what? I'm going to play a song by Will, because maybe you don't know who Will is. So I'm going to play a song from his new album. I think it's the first track. And then it will go into my talk. So please enjoy the song, and then my talk with Will.
Laying on this wild lawn, Beginning.
So wait, Boston. So yes, but you're from all over. Because I read that lived in Nigeria, lived in Paris, London. Are all those true?
Yeah.
Okay. But you ended up here in Los Angeles. Now, did you end up here? We'll get into how you traveled around or why you traveled around a lot. But did you end up here? I've noticed that a lot of people who enjoy Los Angeles, who enjoy California, enjoy it because of they are particularly laid back as people, and it seems to fit the vibe here. It seems to fit the energy. I'm an anxious person, so I stand out in a crowd in Los Angeles for my neuroticism. Are you a laid back person?
Yeah. I think I am. I think I've always been to some extent. Is that what drew me out to California? No, not necessarily. I always, heard about California growing up, and I had been to a lot of places. And I wanted to see it with my own eyes. And my brother had moved out here a year before. We're a year apart, and because he's becoming an actor. So I kind of moved out to after college. I was in Boston because of college, and my parents were living in Rio at the time in Brazil, and I knew I wasn't going to move there, even though I did go there a lot to visit them for Christmas and stuff, and it's amazing there, especially at the time we were there. But it just made sense to kind of reconnect with my brother, and I felt very comfortable coming out here because he was out here.
Were you in Brazil before it started to descend into fascism?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. We were there in the pre-Olympic kind of rise, and it was a really, really kind of happy time to be there. I mean, it's always had its obviously there's a huge social gap there, but we were there at a good time compared to what's going on there now.
Yeah. So this was before Dilma Rousseff there was a soft coup. I don't know what you want to call it, but they deposed her in some way. Mm-hmm. Who was the person before that's now in jail? The president that's now in jail? This is not a quiz, by the way. I can't remember either.
I don't want to get it wrong. I've got a few names in my head, but...
Yeah, okay. But so it was still relatively peaceful.
It was.
And not monstrous.
Yes, exactly.
So wait, okay. Why don't we go back a little bit?
Mm-hmm.
You were born in the United States.
Yes, I was.
Where was it?
I was born in Houston, Texas.
Okay. How did your parents end up in Houston?
So I was actually conceived in the Congo, which may have been... TMI for me when my parents told me, but they were living there. And
did they tell you the whole?
They didn't go into too much detail, thankfully. My brother had been born in a town in the Amazon jungle called Manaus, which is literally smack dab in the middle of the Amazon. And he was born in a hospital that didn't have any electricity. So, my mom, being pregnant with me in the Congo, just didn't want to have that happen again. So my dad and my mom went to Houston, where there was a base for where my dad's company was. And I was born there, lived there for 6 months. So, I don't have any attachment. I've never been back. I don't have any attachment to Houston or Texas. That's one part of my journey that you expect to be a part of your identity where you're born. I know. As you get
older, I'm shaking my head for the listener. I'm shaking my head. No, I'm because I think about you don't form any memories really before how many when do you really think your identity starts, right? Around 3, 4, somewhere around there.
4 or 5. Yeah, no, but I guess I've met a lot of people who were born in one place and lived there for a long time.
Yeah.
So when they're asking you where you're from, they start with where were you born,
right?
You know, and it's just funny to just kind of throw Houston out there, like, I was born in Houston, but it's not a part of who I am.
So you're an Astros fan.
I'm a Red Sox fan, actually. But I was an Astros fan when I was growing up because that was a way for me to try to identify with who I was.
Yeah.
You know, my dad was like, hey, you were born in Houston. Like, there's a baseball team from there. You can be their fan, you know? And my mom really wants me to go back to Houston and you know, for the sake of just seeing it again. But
that's such a weird thing. I think I grew up in Pennsylvania, and I didn't really care much about sports, but you had to like pick a team you liked. Mm-hmm. And so my parents were from New York. They were from New York City. I should have picked like the Jets, I guess, or the Giants or whatever it is. But like, I also wanted to be contrarian in some way or like be an individual. So I picked the Buffalo Bills, even though that's like far upstate New York.
After Silence of the Lambs, of course.
Yeah, of course, sure. What I was really excited about was the idea that there could be a team that wore the skin of their victims. And that's really what pushed me towards liking them. But like there's I remember something Noam Chomsky said once. I read it in one of his books. But like sports teams, there's almost this tribal instinct because like who gives a shit what team you like, and they're frequently trading players back and forth. Mm-hmm. So it's totally just based on like something random, like where you were born or something like that, as opposed to like liking the best wide receiver or something like that. Mm-hmm. So there is a weird kind of like, well, I'm going to like the Astros just because I was born in Houston.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I remember looking at the players on the Astros team and thinking that you had to be born, when I was young, you had to be born in that city to be on that team. So I would look at the baseball cards and see, you know, one of my favorite players, and he'd be born in California, but he was playing for the Astros. And whether this matters or not, that felt weird to me at the time, you know? Like, and I think it's because I always, especially at that age, I was confused about where I was born and what that was supposed to mean, and the living in Nigeria from 3 to 5, for example. When we moved to London after that, people would ask us, me and my brother, where we were from, and we'd say Nigeria. You know? Uh-huh. And of course people, and then we would come back to the States and for the summer, and people would ask us where we were from, and we'd say Nigeria, and they thought that was like a total joke, you know, expecting us to be from like Sudbury, Mass, like down the street from where my grandparents were living, where we used to go visit. But yeah, so that was, I mean, obviously that's like an outlier of a place to live for like a little white boy. Mm-hmm. And then, you know, going to London, you know, we went to British school for a long time. So, but my parents had American accents, so our accents were kind of in and out. Like we were kind of like learning English and, you know, learning the British accent. And then we kind of started to identify as English, but English people could tell that we weren't really English and that we were something else. And then we'd go back to the States. If we couldn't say that we were from Boston, people were like, okay, well, so you're not from Boston. You're not American. Where are you from? So I feel like I just remember all the times that people asked me where I was from because it wasn't an easy answer. And it was like, I need to try to figure out how to cater to this person that's asking me where I'm from, as opposed to just telling the whole story and let them make up their mind. I would kind of, you know, after a while, I would just be like, I'm from Boston. I'm a Red Sox fan. It's you know, it's I don't want it to be complicated. Yeah. But that was at a, you know, I've gone through all different phases of figuring out my identity. And now I'm at the point where I'm very much like, dude, if you want to talk for 5 minutes, I'll tell you the whole story, and hopefully it's interesting and you can make up your mind for yourself, man. Like, it doesn't need to be one place, you know? it doesn't need to be one place. Now my parents live in Virginia, like where my dad grew up, in the Blue Ridge Mountains, Shenandoah Valley area. Beautiful, beautiful countryside.
Real America.
Real America. Absolutely. And that feels like home now.
And trying to figure out who I am as a person, I look at Pennsylvania a lot, and I look at how my parents, Jews from New York, assimilated into Pennsylvania to become indistinguishable mostly, except for some Judaica and a mezuzah on our door and, going to temple once a week and all that stuff, right? Indistinguishable from the repressed Germanic whites of Pennsylvania. And I look to that a lot. I mean, especially from therapy, where they're asking you like, well, why are you the way you are? Mm-hmm. And you look at your family, you look at your friends, and then you kind of look at where you grew up. So how do you, being from a number of places, being born in Houston, so not really having that form you, but having it as a origin point, and then Nigeria, and then London. And how long were you in London for?
8 years.
8 years. And then Paris?
Paris for 5 years.
Okay.
High school.
So mostly, Nigeria, England, and then France. Mm-hmm. Very disparate. How do you look at those places in terms of how they formed you as a person? Or what do you extract from each of those places when you actually like sit there and analyze how they shaped your personality?
Mm-hmm. Nigeria, I was still, like we were talking about, maybe the first instance of like memory and consciousness for me was in Nigeria, age 3 or 4 or 5. So I have memories of like lizards on like beige colored walls and stuff. And I don't know if that was a picture that I saw when I was 11 that I turned into a memory, or if it's a real memory. But my folks said that we were so happy when we were kids there. It's a great place to be a kid. They treat kids like really, really, really well there. And yeah, we were just really, really happy. And of course I had my brother too. So a little too early to really think about how that identified me. But London, of course, was 8 years. And it was the type of assignment for my dad that was like every summer they'd be like, get ready, you're probably going to be in a new continent next summer, so just prepare. And then we stayed, and then we stayed, and then we stayed. And of course the goal for my dad was to try to stay in a place as long as possible so that we didn't have to get uprooted. And
what was his business?
He is a geologist, and he does health, safety, environmental management for an international company.
Do you know what that meant? I asked it because, like, if you asked me what my dad did, he worked at, now he's retired, but he's an accountant for a student. He's the head of student accounting at a college in Philadelphia. But before that, he was business person. And
totally, man.
And I had no idea what that meant. But geologist seems a little... geologist seems interesting, but then geologist working for an international company, that's where I get fuzzy about, like, what does that mean?
So he was a geology major in college, and he got into the oil industry in like the 80s. Mm-hmm. And when we were kids, he never really talked about work because for him it wasn't that interesting. It was just a job to try to provide, And then once we got older and were more curious about it, we realized that he did health and safety management for this international oil field services company. And so it was like if there was a car accident in Argentina, he would have to fly there, find out what happened, and try to prevent that from happening again, and put on seminars for safe driving and only be on the road for this many hours before taking a break, and, developing like malaria kits for workers that are working in, Africa and other countries where that's a risk. Mm-hmm. And he didn't really tell us about that kind of stuff until he thought that we were old enough to care or understand what he was doing. I mean, he was constantly traveling, man. Like, every couple weeks he was gone on a flight, and he'd come home, 2 weeks later, and he always did the same whistle when he came home. He was, see if I can do it. There we go. And that meant that Dad was home. And man, sometimes he'd be so excited to be home, and sometimes he'd get back and you could just see the fucking jet lag in his eyes, and we didn't even really understand, how tiring that like life could be, flying around the world like every couple weeks. And now I do, now I take a flight to the East Coast and I'm like, God, I'm beat. This 3-hour jet lag is killing me.
Yeah.
But so, yeah, that's kind of what his life was like, and there was always the possibility of moving to of getting sent to another continent, at summer's end. And he did everything that he could to keep us where we were.
Yeah.
And London, of course, is a great city to be. I mean, he lived, before we were born, he was in, the Amazon jungle, Venezuela.
Huh.
And
what led him, just beyond being a geologist, what led him into this line of work? Was it Shell? What did he work for?
He worked for a company called Western Geco. It was a Western Geophysical. He called it Western Geco. But his best buddy from college, a guy called Zane, who's kind of a legendary guy.
Just from that name alone, he sounds like...
He's an awesome dude. They both were kind of adventure seekers. They ended up freight train hopping across America together one summer.
Was this the 60s?
Early 80s.
Oh, wow. So morning
80s.
in America, and they decide to just jump on a train like a hobo from 50 years earlier.
Yeah. They've got some good stories from that trip. But Zane, after college, he went and worked for, I think he went straight to South America with an oil company because he was just seeking to travel. That's all he wanted to do. And I think my dad, being the son of German immigrants in rural Virginia, and having done a little bit of traveling because of that, I think he wanted to go on an adventure because he didn't really know what he wanted to do. He wanted to be, when he was growing up, he wanted to be a farmer like all the other kids around. That was his dream. And then he went to college and got away from, and he was always a little bit of an outlier in his town because his parents were German and they were beloved in the town because my dad's dad was the country doctor. But he had a really strong German accent. Never lost it.
You mean German. Not just like German
immigrants. Like after World War II, they immigrated to the States. And he had the strongest accent. And of course, in that area, it's really, really rural Virginia. It was weird to be German there. But of course, because he was the country doctor, so many people relied on him for that. And he was a really, really honorable guy.
Yeah.
That he was beloved in the town. And even now that my parents have moved back there, we'll be at the local farmers bureau or whatever. And like some old guy will be at checkout and be like, are you Dr. Fox's kid? I heard you were coming back,
9.
And so there's like this weird...
yeah.
Yeah. There's this kind of constant reference to him when we're back in Virginia because it's such a small town and people remember those types of things. It's such a small community. But going back to why my dad traveled, his best friend went and worked for this, I think it was an oil company. And he went to South America. I think it was Ecuador. I could be butchering that. My dad's going to listen to this and go, it wasn't Ecuador, but it doesn't matter. And he wanted to just follow in his footsteps. So he looked for any company that would take him that was a traveling company. And I think he started working in Louisiana like a rig or something, just being like a 25-year-old manager of a little crew. And he always says, like, back then it was like the job interview was like checking if you had a pulse, you know?
So how they vet Lyft drivers today is how they used to vet oil rig workers.
Yeah, I used to drive for Lyft too, so that hits home. But yeah, he was and eventually he made it to South America, and he wasn't in Ecuador, he was in Venezuela and Brazil, and but that was what was intriguing to him, was the adventure of traveling.
Yeah, he wanted to escape a kind of... Wait, I mean, what changed for him from wanting to be a farmer to wanting to travel the world? Do you know what I mean? I always had this kind... I never had like a dramatic shift. I always did not like suburbia. Mm-hmm. Lived in suburban Pennsylvania, and just it always felt like weird to me. And so I wanted to get out at all times. And the shape of how I got out changed, but the desire to leave never changed. So do you know what changed with your dad, where he went from no, I'm going to stay here in rural Virginia and become a farmer, to, no, I want to travel the world?
I think that's a great question. I think it's because, for example, his best friend Tommy, growing up, his dad was a farmer, and he ended up, following in his dad's footsteps and taking over the farm. A lot of that's kind of a legacy around there, especially back then it was. And so and my dad did work on farms in high school, but to really own a farm, I mean, I don't know if I'm getting this wrong, but it makes a lot more sense if it's being passed down to you and you've been doing it your whole life. It's so much work, man.
Yeah.
And I just think because his folks were obsessed with his kids getting a good education, and the school system around there at the time was just small. And so I think they were just kind of looking to get them out of that small town. I think that his folks were trying to push all their kids out of the nest and go yes, we came here and this is a beautiful part of America and this is where we've made our home and this means everything to us. But for you, there's a lot more that you can do than be a farmer, whether that's what you want or not. Go see if there's something else that you want to do. And so I think once he went to a boarding school in Philadelphia, actually outside of Philly, called Westtown. It's like a Quaker school. And I think that was the first time that he was considered like the Southern boy. But I think he met a bunch of kids that were kind of from all over and got along with everybody. And then he went to school in Maine, and so he got further and further away. Then he studied, he ended up going to Innsbruck because he knew he had family over there and lived there for a year, in Austria. And I think at that point, it was that the dream of being a farmer was a pipe dream.
Right.
But to skip 30 years, once he got sucked into the career that he had, which was purely the generation of, I need to provide for my family.
Yeah. My parents too.
Yeah. And allow his children to be what they want to be. He always knew that he at least wanted to retire back home in that area. And whether he could be a dairy farmer or not, he could have some land and he could rent out some of his land for beef cattle and still live that peaceful life and mow the grass and take care of the land and live that simple life, and that's what he what he's doing now. But it took 30 years, and so we call it a farm where my parents live. There's like a rusty old barn that's awesome, and there's cows on the land, and but he's not a farmer, but he's living
the life.
He's living the best parts of a life as a farmer,
right? Without waking up at 5 a.m. and breaking your back,
exactly,
baling hay,
exactly.
So his parents kind of sent him on like an existential Rumspringa in a certain sense of like, go out and see what it's like outside of this small town,
yeah,
and then figure out what you want to do.
Yeah. I think that's what it was, and yeah, I think it was just getting to college and meeting a bunch of other kids and having the idea of traveling, kind of like that snowball and snowball and snowball, and I think that's what, and then wanting to follow the path of his best friend and have an adventure.
Yeah.
That's what, and then you're in it, and there's no turning back. That's kind of what it was for him, and once he was very, very in love with my mom. They went to college together, on and off for a little while, and then the crazy thing was, and I might be skipping around here, but that's what a conversation is, right? He was working in Venezuela. He ended up making it to South America to follow his buddy who was in Ecuador. And that was at the time where they were, you had to send letters to each other to communicate. And one night, my dad's best friend Zane was in a bar in Quito and saw my mom. Julie McDonald was her name at the time. Her last name at the time, of course. And so he sent a letter to my dad and said, "You'll never believe who I just ran into in Quito, Ecuador," because my mom was doing Peace Corps in Ecuador at the time. Because my mom had the itch to travel too. And my dad was like so in love with her, but things didn't work out at the end of college, and they kind of lost touch. And he was like, "Man, this is a sign." And he ended up coming up to visit her, and they re-sparked their love. And like from then on, it was, they're such a unit. So I mean, we're so close, man. All four of us, me and my brother and my mom and my dad, and we had to be. I met a lot of kids that, growing up and going to international schools, that I feel like this might be a good segue to talk about this, because it's kind of interesting. But like the third culture kid is what they call these types of kids who are living this type of lifestyle. It's like their parents are from one place, they were born in one place, and they're living in another place. Sometimes their parents are from two different places, and sometimes by the age of 15, they've already lived in 10 countries. And obviously that's going to have a psychological effect on you. And I read that there's a couple different ways of coming out of that and dealing with that when you're maturing. And one of them is to be really outgoing, really extroverted, flexible, adapt, take in as much as you can, learn from everything, have an open mind, open heart. And you meet kids like that in school for sure. And then there's the other side where you can't bear to say goodbye to your two fucking friends again, that you just shut off the next time you get to a new country. And you have to try to start learning a new language and meeting new kids and being the new kid again at age 13 or 14. And you can't fucking do it again. And I think that I was so lucky in the times that I moved to places, the people that I've met, the way that my parents pushed us to be open-minded and positive all the time. And obviously, looking back, we're so lucky we lived in amazing cities. It could have been very different. We didn't have any choice in where we were living.
Could have been Liechtenstein.
Which
I really don't know
drove
much
through it a couple times.
I don't know anything about it.
It only takes about 15 minutes.
Just seems like if you had a choice between Paris or London, and then whatever, Luxembourg, I don't know what. Like
here, another good point is when we moved from London to Paris, I was 13. I finally made some good friends. And when my dad said, we've got some bad news, we're moving to Paris this summer, I was like in tears. You know, all you can think about when you're 13 is what any 13-year-old kid around the world is thinking about. It's their community and their friends and maybe the person that they have a crush on or something, you know? And so, and then...
Or in my case, Weird Al's new album.
And so looking back with retrospect, it's like, oh, how lucky I am to have lived in this amazing, you know, the cultural, you know, hub of the world, Paris, France. But when you're 13, you're 13, man. That kind of stuff didn't really interest me at the time. In high school it did, and I started opening up my mind to like how important it was that I was living in these cultural cities and I should take advantage of it. But when you're 13, you don't care. And so it was hard at the time, you know. But then, of course, you move, you have an open mind, you try to make some friends. They're some of my best friends in the world now that actually live out here.
Well, that's why you fit into Los Angeles. You have that, you have the open mind that I think is required.
Yeah.
Not a cynical kind of,
yeah.
I don't want to say I hate everything, but I definitely have a
kind of, yeah, you meet people like that out here too.
Yeah. I'm trying not to. I'm trying to be a more open person. It is a struggle.
Well, I also wanted to, like, you doing this is so cool. You're a creative person and
try to be.
Yeah. And you get to, I would love to ask you quickly how that affects your own creativity or your own identity as a creative person, being able to talk to so many people about the different ways that their life has affected their creativity and the way that they deal with the struggles of being a creative person.
I mean, I think in not having given it much thought past just you asking it, I do think that it does combat the misanthropy. It combats my natural kind of desire just to be insular. Having to talk to people and kind of unravel the mystery of this kind of like existential mystery of like, how did you become the person you are? And then, I mean, the theory behind the show is that is a better way to understand the music you make, you know, or the book you write or whatever it is, than asking you like, you know, why did you write this lyric? Or
right.
I remember I saw Pavement in Philly at the Trocadero, I think on the Terror Twilight tour, and they were very nice, and they came out back afterwards and were answering fans' questions. And one girl asked, it wasn't just one person, but like a lot of people just kept asking Steve Malkmus, like, what did this lyric mean? What did this lyric mean? He's just like kind of like you could see him just trying to like struggle with like, I don't know, I think I liked this thing, and so it made me think of that or whatever, you know.
Well, especially with him, like his lyrics are so kind of out there.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. But like just asking someone, I don't know, because I've written lyrics before and I'm just like, I don't know, it's kind of just like the image that popped into my head. There's like usually a core of something real there, but then it just like, I don't know, that image popped into my head, so I wrote that thing, and then I needed something that kind of rhymed with it, so I went through all the available words, and this was the most interesting one that did that. I don't find that stuff that interesting. So I think this forces me in some way to learn about people in a way that I naturally... I mean, here's the thing. I mean, this is... I talked about this with Naomi on our other show, Couples Therapy, but like we just went to my sister's wedding in Florida, and I forgot for a long time about my parents, but like I forgot that they do this, but they don't ever want to really rock the boat. They want like very nice social interactions, which is fine. I don't fault them for that. But then their advice, they're not their advice, but they always tell you like, well, don't ask about this thing. Like your cousin has rheumatoid arthritis, whatever it is. I don't want to say like a real thing that someone had, but like there's a lot of diseases in my family. And they're like, don't ask them about that. And it turned out that like when I asked my one family member about, like, I was just like asking, like, well, how are you doing? You have blank. How are you? We had like a great conversation. But there again, this is why I said early on, where they assimilated into repressed Germanic Pennsylvania, which is don't rock the boat. Very waspy. Don't ask about anything that could cause someone to have an emotion more than a slight smile. And so, like, trying to escape that, I think, and trying to, and if as a writer, I have to know about different kinds of people. So I think this generally like feeds right into that. And also it just feeds into like general like conversations. I don't mean this in a bad way. Like, small talk is fine. I don't mind it, but it's not that interesting to me. And it's really it's a lot of work to keep small talk going. It's not a lot of work to keep a deeper conversation about someone's parents going.
Yeah, you're right.
I mean, it's more like there's more, you talking, I have way more questions than if you were just like, well, I'm thinking about buying a car and this is the kind of car I want to get and it has this kind of mileage. And I'm like, okay. Like, even just like, I mean, I might as well ask you, like, your parents, we don't even have to talk specifically if you don't want to, but like your grandparents emigrating from Germany right after the war. Did you ask? I mean, if I had grandparents that came from a politically difficult area of the world, I don't know if I would have the guts to ask, hey, what were you doing from, say, 1939 to 1945? And I don't know if you ever did or if that was like a worry. I would be worried, honestly.
I think my dad was always really fascinated by my grandfather was in the Luftwaffe. He's joined when he was 17 years old, and he figured I probably have a better chance of survival if I'm in the air and not on the ground. And he survived the war. He ended up being a POW in France for, I don't know how long it was, but it was, I mean, he's a stoic guy. He died a few years ago. But I mean,
yeah, what do you do? It's
such a drastically different life to live as a 17-year-old that I can't even wrap my head around it. And he had this whole second half of his life that was different. He became a doctor and had a family and was an American and loved America. Loved that he was able to have that second chance and opportunity in America. Obviously, you also run into these strange questions where you go, oh yeah, my grandfather's German. And people go, so your grandfather was a Nazi? And it's like, no, there was 16 million soldiers in the German army, and 250,000 of them, I think, were part of the SS. But you think every 17-year-old kid in Germany that was drafted for the war is a fucking Nazi? They didn't even know. Some of them didn't even know what was going on till the end of the war. So that was always a really hard thing to wrap my head around, because like my grandfather was like a super, super liberal guy. My parents are too. And especially growing up where they were, it's not, that's you're an outlier around there if you think that way. And so that always like hurt me when people would say that, and I understand why people just want to, it's like this easy dramatic thing to say or talk about. That is a true drama in the world, like some of the worst drama in the world. But yeah, it always hurt me, but I also had to try to figure out how to like be okay with like people thinking that and just being like, they're just young and stupid and don't realize that it's not black and white,
I mean, it's a very interesting moral question, because you see it now. Let's say, I mean, as the U.S. descends into fascism, hopefully it stops at some point. Hopefully,
it will.
let's say we attack or anyone who was in the army during. I have one of my best friends fought in Afghanistan and Iraq, and it's just like, how do you? That was definitely a war of aggression built on lies. We all knew it was lies. Most of us knew it was lies while it was happening. How do you really wrap your mind around that question? Or how do you, with my friend, I'm just like, I kind of wall it off, and I don't ask him about it, and I don't hold him morally culpable for what Rumsfeld and Bush and Cheney and those fuckers did. I don't know how. Yeah, I really don't. I don't know how to answer that or grapple. I really don't know how to grapple with it. Even it just seems easier to wall it off, like the cask of Amontillado, and in my brain somewhere, and just be like, all right, we're not going to struggle with this question. There's other moral questions you can struggle with in this world that directly relate to you and not to your best friend. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. I don't know. I don't know presently what to do with any of this stuff.
Yeah.
Because how do you hold? Who do you hold responsible ultimately for certain things? And it's just like, I grit my teeth, and then I make a sound, and then I go, would you like more lemonade? Change the subject. It's a very difficult question. It's difficult. I assume it's, you can tell me how you feel about this stuff. Like, I'm sure it's difficult as you yourself become, and we started this talk with kind of talking about like how did you form your identity? I'm sure, how do you form your moral identity is wrapped up in questions like this.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. Again, the same. I recognize game with the deep sigh of moral complexity.
Yeah. Yeah. God, I mean, if we're talking about like the simplest moral compass,
yeah.
My both of my parents, like, I think have really, really solid moral compasses, and I'm sure it was tough for my dad growing up with people saying that kind of shit about his dad. Oof. But then of course people realized that wasn't, true, and that he was a great doctor, and sometimes he wouldn't even make people pay for his services.
Yeah.
And he was like a really, really honorable guy. So I would hope that those actions show that you don't have to be worrying about that kind of shit, But anyway, for me, like, my folks just really just be good to people. Just be good to people. Yeah. I don't. To me, it's shocking that some people have a hard time doing that. Whether you're fucking ordering a coffee from a barista and you're being I work in the service industry, so. But like, it was really, really, really simple for me growing up. Like, would I want to be treated this way? Like, I look back at like just elementary school and middle school, like, be nice to kids. I was shy most of the time, but, and I was deathly aware of when people were feeling, like they were getting picked on in some way, even if it was just kind of joking and no one really realized. Like, I have this like spidey sense that like someone over here in this side of the room, like someone says something over here and I can just feel their energy go down, and I'm like, fuck, poor guy. You're attuned.
I'm the same way. I get attuned to the environment very easily in a way that hijacks my own emotions.
Me too.
It's difficult to really like figure out what I'm feeling when someone else is feeling something strongly around me.
Totally.
Because then I don't know what it is with my brain.
You take it on.
Yeah.
You take it on. I was always like that. So like, I like to think that any social decision I ever made since I was in elementary school was was to always try to calm those little spikes, and just always just it sounds so trivial, but just be nice, man. Smile, make someone smile, make someone laugh, be nice. It goes longer. It goes such a long way. And whether you're 12 years old and some kid's getting picked on and you go up to him afterwards and start talking about Star Wars, or you're 35 and you're going in to get a coffee and you can tell that this barista's having the worst day of their lives, and you go, how are you doing, man? It's pretty crazy in here, isn't it? You know, like, dude, I do this too. It's all good. I'm sure you're off soon, man. Anyway, thank you so much. Just made my day getting my coffee. You know, like simple shit like that.
Is that part of you needing to adapt to new places?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's like what we were talking about before is like that uprooted lifestyle can take you in and of course this is a generalization. This is making it more black and white. There's obviously a gray scale in between, but
right.
it generally can go in two directions. You close off, you open up in a polarized way. And I was always on the side of being positive, opening up, meeting people because it's also, that's a snowball effect. Once you start doing that and realize that like you can have a really good time with people from anywhere as long as you're cheersing and smiling and being open-minded, then you want that feeling. You look for that feeling because it makes your life better and it makes you feel better. Mm-hmm. And for me, that's how it was. And
oh, hey, let me try something. See if this feels right to you. Because both of us appear similar in the same way that like we get hijacked easily by other people's emotions. I tend to isolate so that doesn't happen. Do you tend to try to make everything okay, mm-hmm. so that everyone's feeling okay, mm-hmm. so that you feel okay then? Mm-hmm. Does that seem right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's like you put in the work to make everybody's energy positive, so then you can feed off of their positive energy.
Interesting.
And you know, this is generally talking. I go through my own bouts of, you know, we all do. But I try really, really, really hard to do that. And when people are feeling down, like that are close to me, I take it on so hard. And that's what music is good for, is like releasing that.
Yeah, it's also a good way of controlling the energy in the room.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh my God. Yeah.
Because no matter what other kind of thing I do, whether it's writing, whether it's comedy, improv, stand-up, whatever, anything I'm doing, I've never found a good, what would you call it? Like a attractor for talking about like complexity theory. An attractor is a thing that, like, you know, I mean, it's called that because it draws everything, mm-hmm. things to tend to swirl around it, right? Mm-hmm. Music is the best version of that. It's like an emotional attractor, and you can create whatever emotion you want and get everyone in the room attuned to that emotion, or, you know, approaching that emotion, mm-hmm. right?
Mm-hmm. I mean, that's a really cool way to think about it. I've never thought about it that way, but to think that my own kind of like empathetic tendency, which is an understatement, is maybe directly connected to that is really interesting to think about, man.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it makes sense. We're close to the end, but I wanted to ask a couple questions about, like, so what was it like living in London, growing up in London? Really, that's where like probably a lot of your identity was formed, mm-hmm. in England, mm-hmm. as an, I was going to say expatriate, not really an expatriate, but ish.
Yeah.
Expatriate-ish.
Expatriate-ish, yeah. It's a good album name. Sounds like a Stephen Malkmus album name, doesn't it?
Sure. I was about to say, like, I'll tweeted at him. Like he reads his replies. I'm sure he, hey, name your next album this. Like, who the fuck are you?
Well, when I think about London, man, we lived in a little neighborhood called Battersea, and it's right on the Thames River. It was kind of like a in between, like it was like a middle class neighborhood at the time. Now it's like one of those cool neighborhoods. Apparently, like I've talked to people like, oh, I used to live in Battersea. Like, oh man, Battersea is really cool now.
It's like the Williamsburg of London.
Yeah, exactly. I think so, at least. But there was a big park there called Battersea Park. Awesome park, man. And on the weekend when my dad was around, our favorite thing was to go to the park and play soccer, because you got to play soccer if you want to be accepted and extroverted with English kids. You got to play footy. So we'd play soccer, but my dad like loved baseball, so he wanted to instill this Americanness in us kind of through baseball. And so we'd play like wiffle ball in the park. We were probably the only people ever to play wiffle ball in Battersea Park every weekend, you know. I left when I was 13, so of course there was also like maybe trying to start pretending to skateboard at like 13, like getting a skateboard. But I was also one of those kids who, like, I hung out with kids who were kind of like mischievous and stuff. Mm-hmm. But I was the guy just standing behind them, kind of going like, are you guys sure we should do this? I don't know. But I would laugh if something went down.
I think I played the same role.
Yeah. Like I wasn't a risky kid at all. And I never have been in that way. But I loved to laugh. And those kids were, you know, those were the guys who were the funniest, because they were risk takers and they weren't afraid of stuff. And like, I was really, really attracted to.
Oh wait, sorry. Let me venture this, because I wanted to do that, and I never had the guts. I always had my parents' voice in my head, which is just like,
oh, me too, man.
Play it safe. What are you doing? And it didn't. I wonder. You know, I'm curious then, like, what gives you the courage to try to do something, to try to make art for a living? Do you know what I mean? Because I wasn't able to really start breaking down my parents' programming, and which is not a bad, like, I don't blame them. It's not a bad programming to like drill into your kids' heads. You should
be safe and follow the rules.
Yeah. It's not a bad thing, but I also like, the rules were created by assholes mostly. Mm-hmm. The older I get, the more I'm like, oh, like there's a quote unquote rule in stand up. I'm not a stand up, but I'm adjacent to that world. Mm-hmm. And there's a rule in there that's like, well, once you have recorded a joke like on TV, once you've done a joke on a TV set, or once you've done it on like a stand up podcast or something like that, you got to get rid of that joke. And that rule was created by Louis C.K., who's a sex offender, right? So most of the time, when you like try to find the origins of a lot of rules, you find out they were created by assholes. So it's just like, why am I following this rule? Why do I feel, again, this moral compunction to color within the lines in a certain sense? And it took me a while to kind of break out of that. Mm-hmm. How did you break out of that? Well,
I mean, I do think, you know, obviously it takes courage and it takes support, having a support group, you know, a support system. That without that, I don't think I would, I don't know, man. I can't imagine doing anything else now. But when I think about what my music is and what the purpose of my music is, it's a little bit like what we were talking before. I'm trying to take things that are happening in my life as I'm breaching adulthood and dealing with the obstacles and the curveballs that life is going to throw at you for the rest of the time, and give some meaning to it, put it back out into the world so that other people, trying to attract some feeling for them, so that other people can feel less alone. I mean, we haven't even talked much about music, you know, during this hour, but like music is what helped me not feel alone when I was growing up. As I was trying to, you know, my parents were shepherding this like positivity and stuff, and that was huge. And I have them to thank for all of that. But like music was my individual connection to the world and feeling there is something out there that I'm connecting to personally, that it's not my parents that are telling me to listen to this shit. I'm finding it and I love it and I connect to it mysteriously. And that's what I'm trying to do now. And yes, I think of course it takes courage to decide to do something creative, especially in for both of us. Money is pretty non-existent so far.
And the capitalist hellscape of modern America.
Yeah. But you keep going, and if you believe in that message, my message being trying to figure out how to make sense of shit that is hard and proving to people that you can get out of it by recording a song, which takes work and putting emotion into it and then putting it out in the world. That's how I always kind of looked at it. Like if I was listening to a song growing up that was about something tough, be like, yeah, they went through a tough time, but they had the courage to write something about it, be creative, package it up, put it out into the world for other people to hear. That means that they got up and moved on and moved forward. And as you get older, you start to realize that life is so much about letting go and moving forward, because as you start to deal with your first tragedies, like people deal with it at all different times, but for me it was kind of early 20s. Found out that my dad had cancer. He's doing well now, but it was really scary for a while. That was crushing for me. And music helped me move past that. And I also realized during that time, like, man, you just have to move past it because you don't have any choice. So if you can help other people move past that kind of stuff, then you're doing some good. You're actually doing some good. Even if it's only a couple people that are listening, you know? And that means something to me, man, to be able to help somebody in that way. And if you just like the song and you like the music, that's awesome too. But if you can feel some courage from it, then that's what I'm chasing, man. I'm chasing that on like I'm trying to make that happen as much as possible. And it's just fun. But another thing that you said, I know we're probably running out of time, but the more that you talk to creative people, the more that you realize that the deeper conversations that you have with people, the other side of small talk, that's so much more interesting, is you realize that everybody is so complex. And everybody has this long history and this long journey, and everybody has these obstacles. The more that you talk to people and realize that a lot of these people are getting through that stuff and are moving past it, it gives you hope that humans are capable of a lot more than we think, because we see each other on these very superficial levels. But you doing this is such a good way of finding out these people's stories that you wouldn't otherwise know, and it gives you courage that, oh man, that guy went through, or that, you know, that person went through this, and look at them, they got through it, man. If I go through it, I can. If I go through that, I can get through it too. And if you spend your whole life with small talk, you wouldn't know that, you know.
So yes, so the lesson is get out of your repression, ask people real questions. Don't look. If you're at the gas station and you're going and you buy a Twinkie, don't ask the cashier his or her life story. All right? I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about if your friend is going through...
That is something I would do.
There's so much repression. Like, it took... you know, one of my other best friends, it took, like, some tragedy in their life for me to like actually start asking real questions.
Mm-hmm.
You know, most of our conversations dating back to childhood were just like, you know, joke riffs and like Simpsons quotes.
Yeah.
Which is great. Look, it's great, but then, you know, that stuff starts wearing out once like real life starts invading your brain and your existence.
Mm-hmm.
So, yeah, well, this seems like a nice place to end, though.
Yeah, I think so too, man.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, man.
All right.
Thank you.
And we'll see you guys next time. Bye.
Bye, oh, 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 bye.